So imagine how far our country has come from, in 2007 we had 5 million internet users to now close to 1 billion. And that arc has been truly fascinating of the development of the e-commerce and the broader digital and startup ecosystem. The future is incredibly bright for a few reasons. Firstly, to reiterate what Sir mentioned, the support that the government has given. From 350 start IIT to now 117,000 just in a span of 8-9 years is truly incredible. And at least my view is that the number is probably underreported by a large number, largely because some have not registered or companies like ours have outgrown the qualification now. Secondly, the GDP growth is so dramatic going forward in terms of absolute addition to GDP that's going to happen. If we are going to add $3.5 trillion of GDP in the next 6-7 years, that's going to be incredible amount of growth that the startups will also enjoy across the country. And then the domestic capital ecosystem, which was absolutely absent in India until a few years ago, why despite the acute startup funding winter that exists in the West, why were we not impacted as much? We were impacted, mostly at the growth stages, but we were not impacted as much because over the last few years, the rails of the domestic capital ecosystem were laid down, driven largely and significantly by the fund of funds that was mentioned by Sir earlier, where 140 fund managers, domestic fund managers were seeded by the SIDBI fund of funds. And now that money is in circulation because now that money will come back, so more fund managers can be seeded in the future. No large global startup ecosystem was built without the bedrock of domestic capital. That's why Europe doesn't have a startup ecosystem. Many other countries don't. That's why America has one. And that's why China has one. And that's why India has one. The other very important aspect, which we tend to now forget because it is so invisible to all of us, is the incredible amount of digitization that has happened in our country. Oftentimes people keep saying that, I met some investors, global investors recently, and they said, look, India is always a country that has a lot of potential, but then you guys do something that makes we feel you're moving forward and then you take 5 steps back. So why is it going to be different this time? And the reason I feel it's going to be different this time is because of technology. The permeation of technology across the country has never been witnessed to this degree till now. So whether it's the entire India stack, whether it's the internet connectivity, all of those are contributing to the growth of the startup ecosystem. And finally, I would say talent. Right? We have 1.4 crore college graduates every year. But we have only 1 lakh startups registered today. There's a big delta between the number of graduates we are creating versus the number of startups we have. Now, I don't believe that all of them will become startup founders, but many of them will and should. Or many of them will go work for startups also going forward. So there's a confluence of reasons, this constellation of reasons are coming together finally for our country, which will really push this startup ecosystem to greater heights.